There is no one scorecard for determining who won and who lost last night, but a consensus does seem to be emerging. Ross Perot, the star of the night, partly because no one knew what to expect. Bill Clinton, just good enough. And President Bush, he'll have to do much better.
It was October 1992. George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, was president. He was running for re-election. And at the first presidential debate that year, he absolutely bombed. If that Tom Brokaw stand-up was not enough to convince you, check out the headline in the Boston Herald the next day. Bush strikes out. A Snap poll taken after the debate found the percentage of voters who thought President Bush had won the debate was in the teens. It was 18%. That first debate went very terribly for Poppy Bush, and indeed, he went on to lose his effort to be reelected in 1992. But look at the rest of the data here. The first debate also went terribly for Poppy Bush's son in 2004 when he was looking for a second term, running for re-election against John Kerry. Reviews of his first debate performance were just as brutal as the ones had been for his dad. Like this one from The Atlantic, quote, "That was George Bush's worst performance in a debate by far ever. My mantra had been that neither Bush nor Kerry had ever lost a debate. That is no longer true." George W. Bush's approval rating a week before that debate was as high as 54%. After his terrible performance in that first debate, it dropped 7 points just from that one debate. But of course, he went on to win re-election anyway in 2004. Then there was what happened to President Obama in 2012. Again, looking for a second term, running for re-election up against his opponent, Mitt Romney. The first debate that year, a disaster for the incumbent president. The headlines were unanimous. Obama snoozes and loses. Romney was hungry. Obama was flat. Mitt Romney comes out on top as Obama stumbles in first debate. Obama had a 9-point lead in the polls in September 2012. After his terrible performance in October, he ended up tied with Romney in the polls. But then Obama won election in November and got a second term. Regardless of the eventual electoral outcome, it is almost an axiom of politics that first debates are rocky for incumbent presidents. Now, why is that? What is it about being an incumbent president that makes you suck at your first debate when you're running for re-election? I don't know. Lots of competing explanations out there, but it does seem to be something that universally holds. I will also mention that Donald Trump was no exception. When he was the incumbent 4 years ago, it was not that long ago. I'm sure you remember how that went for him. But I think this headline at The Guardian sums it up well. This was after the first debate with Donald Trump as the incumbent and Joe Biden as the challenger. Quote, "Donald Trump ensures first presidential debate is national humiliation." It's always the case. And tonight, Joe Biden was the 9th incumbent president in a televised general election debate. He and his team very, very, very much wanted to defy the debating incumbent curse. They did not defy the debating incumbent curse. That said, losing the first debate is not a fatal thing for incumbent presidents. It is a historical certainty that they lose the first debate. But in terms of its overall electoral impact, history says meh. Joining us now is former Republican Party chairman, the co-host of The Weekend here on MSNBC, our beloved friend Michael Steele. Mr. Steele, it is great to see you.
How are you doing, my friend? What a night. Everybody rested and raring to go, right?
We are hydrated. We did our weird yoga poses that make our backs hurt less when we sit here for 6 hours at a time. We're great. What did you think of the debate, and what have you been hearing from people tonight who saw it?
So I have thoughts, and I'll start with where you left off. Everything you said about those other presidential debates is absolutely 100% correct. But what you did not have after them was the incumbent president's party openly musing about taking him off the ticket. And I think that is something that is very different in this one. Tonight, you have MAGA gloating and Democrats outwardly worrying about the state of the race, to the point that they are not hiding their discussions about how they get Joe off the ticket. I think a lot of that is unfortunate. I think a lot of that is overblown at the moment, but I get the emotion. I thought Claire was an exhibit of that emotion, of that gut punch that she referenced, that a lot of Democrats are feeling. But here are a couple of things that I think need to be focused on, just kind of putting my sort of campaign party hat on and sort of rally the troops and get your ass in gear conversation. One is Nicole said it best. Own tonight. Don't pretend it was something it wasn't. Sit down with Joe, play that tape, play it, and slow-mo that sucker if you have to get him to appreciate exactly what it was we saw and how he performed and how in many respects he let himself down. Because if any of us know the president, and a lot of us do, have seen him over these many, many years, we know how much he regards being honest about that. So let him be honest about that and have that assessment and take him out of situations where he's seemingly lying about his performance. He will endear himself. He will move people to appreciate a lot of things about him if he owns the moment. I thought, for example, Lawrence was also very clear in how this thing needs to get laid out. Again, don't overthink what happened. Rethink how you move forward. Reimagine what tomorrow looks like. And by tomorrow, I mean Morning Joe tomorrow, all right? And really begin to put in place the next set of building blocks. Because right now, MAGA's on the run. They got this, baby. You should see and hear the stuff that's coming up, right? They are primed, they're ready. They're like, we told you this is what he was. Joe Biden is old and out of date. Donald Trump is the man, all of that crazy. But Donald Trump is a serial liar. He's a petulant little boy in a man's orange suit, right? And he sits here and he tells lie after lie after lie after lie. Joe Biden, to Jen Psaki's point, was not prepared to deal with that. And he was ill prepared because he was fed numbers instead of doing what I've said from the very beginning of the day. I was on Morning Joe and said Joe Biden would be the nominee of the Democratic Party because Joe Biden is his best when he is Joe Biden. And they forgot that. His campaign forgot that. They put that cocoon around him as president, and they fact him up with all these facts and numbers, and the man got lost. So there's some things that are recoverable here, but they have to first start to own the moment. And you don't really kind of do that by pushing the vice president out there. I think the president at some point has to look America in the eye and go, I'm sorry I let you down. I should have been better prepared. And you know me better than that, and that's not how my parents raised me, and that's not how I'm going to lead you. And I think that moment sort of takes what happened with Donald Trump, because guess what then, Rachel? All of a sudden, all the stuff that we're not talking about that we heard and saw with Donald Trump kind of comes back and refocus. Begins to be, people begin to look at it and go, yeah, now that I think about it, Donald Trump said some crazy behind stuff, right? So I think that Democrats need to, bring it down, stop the, let me tell you what I'm hearing from operatives and others, and just reset.
Michael Steele, tough love. We always get tough love from you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.